So you've all been here. You understand that this is a Black History Museum where we focus on preserving and sharing and exploring Black history. So today we are having a really important talk with Kandy Lopez and Tayina Deraville, who is a curator. Kandy is the artist who created all the work you've seen around you. And this, of course, is a little portion of it. So, and Tayina is a curator who does all types of things. She weaves tales, right? And Allison Bowler, what?
You're good.
Okay, so Allison Bowler, she sent me her, so my name is Kala. I am the exhibitions manager. So it's my task, one of my tasks is to bring in amazing people that we can trust to share with the community amazing things. And we usually, I think, are pretty successful at that. So I also create the installations and things like that. So that's who I am. Now, Allison Bowler. She sent to me her bio. Now let me just say it's extremely modest. Extremely modest. So this is what her bio says. That she was born in Alberta, Canada. She lives and works in South Florida. Her installations, she's an artist, and she creates installations that are multimedia, paper-based works as well, both photography, video. She has an MFA from Minneapolis College of Art and Design. And, okay, Team MFA. And she is the Language Arts Department Chair and American Literature Instructor at Deerfield Beach High School. Okay, so and that is very modest because what Allison Bowler does in the community and for the youth is amazing. We've collaborated on a couple of different projects. She's an academic, she's an intellectual, she's thoughtful, and she's very committed to social change and making sure we have an awareness for what's going on in the world, which is why she is the perfect person to have this conversation with Kandy Lopez and Tayina Deraville. Okay, so now I'll let you do your thing.
I really appreciate that. My goal tonight is to ensure that Kandy has the opportunity to share with you the deeper our methods, some of the thinking behind the work that she does, because I really think Kandy's work is very special. The first time I saw Kandy's work, I was like, okay, why are you not what's happening here? That was in 2019, and between 2019 and now, her career has rightfully taken off. Tayina, who I met in 2016 after I got my MFA in Minneapolis, is a dogged arts professional here in South Florida. In Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Art Basel, with anybody who is doing anything, especially around artists of color in South Florida, Tayina is willing to go and contribute her time, her thinking, to making sure that the communities around us have access to really rigorous, engaging art. So these two women I admire. I can't even tell you how honored I am to be here to moderate this panel today. So I love the show. So I had a conversation with Kandy back in November because I wanted to write about her work for a really long time. I've been meaning to write about her work since 2019, and it's 2024. With my own teaching and, life changes and the pandemic, she and I had a really long conversation back in November about her work. And at the time, we really focused on her stained glass pieces. And what you see in this room is kind of a trajectory us to really kind of talk about how Tayina was able to select pieces that tell a story about her practice, like there's a through line in her practice. But unless you're an artist, you don't know what it means to change from being an illustrator to a stained glass maker. That's madness. And the fact that Kandy has done this in her practice, I feel like it's like every 2 years she's like, okay, I'm done with that. Let me try something new. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But Kandy, tell us about how your work as an artist. She's also a professor of art at Nova Southeastern University, and when we've talked about how those two things kind of balance each other out. Talk a little bit about that.
About the balance?
About the balance, and also a little bit about how your practice kind of
Flows in that.
flows in that.
I got the job at Nova in 2016. The same time I moved from Tampa, so I was in Daytona State for 2 years teaching as a professor there as well. And then I came down and I moved in with my boyfriend, who's now my husband, and we decided to get a house and get married. So that was all like, bam, yeah, 2016. And then after that, like, he is really family oriented. He comes from a family that has been together for a long time, which I really admire because there have been issues within my own. So to be able to be in a space where, or in a relationship where somebody like understands how to stay in a relationship is really important to me. And I say all this because there's no way I can do what I do without him and his support. Like, he's home now with kids. And also my parents. And I'm blessed to have both of my parents and both of his parents close by with my 2 kids. So, as a professor, I have to teach 4 classes a semester, which is a heavy load for us. And my father is very militant, and his father was also very militant. So like being on a schedule has passed down to me. So, and my mom is the opposite. She's like free and she's a risk taker and she'll jump to certain places and she's extremely adaptable. So I feel like I got that from her. So when it's time to create, like it's time to create. So things are off, if people call me, I'm sorry, I'm like in the studio. And when it's time to teach, it's time to teach. But when you have kids, it's like, you know,
they don't care about
your
that.
schedule needs to adapt to what's going on in their lives too. So like that balance of like being a teacher and wanting to be there for my students, because I am a very passionate teacher. I want students to see themselves within art spaces where they usually don't, especially teaching in South Florida. But my kids are my #1 priority. And as long as they're being taken care of and I have, you know, mommy time with them, which I think is also really important, I'm okay there. But my art is like my center because I've been creating art since I was 12 years old that I can remember. And I'm turning 37. And it wasn't just like, oh, I'm doodling on a sheet of paper. It was like, here's a still life, here's your set of watercolor, here's your 24 by 18 inch sheet of paper, and you're gonna sit here for 2 hours every day after taking science and math classes, and you're gonna try to depict that. That's how I started.
And see, and for me, I think as a teacher, but also as an artist, we tend to think that when somebody pops up in the art world, like, oh, there's a new voice, it's this that we don't care about. We don't think about the networks that they have around them, the self-discipline that they have. But that's rooted in 2 things, right? Passion for art, but also people who share with you what structure can look like in your life, right? Because that's something I really want anyone who sees Kandy's work to know, that there are clear boundaries that she sets, but all those boundaries are grounded in a real respect and a real love for the different aspects of her life. So yeah, I think that's Yeah. Okay, and in another vein, so Tayina didn't start in art.
Right.
She got her start elsewhere, and so I'm gonna ask her to talk a little bit about that. But in a similar way, there is a kind of a dogged determination to facilitate art in our community. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I started in psychology and mental health counseling. So while I, was in high school, I really wanted to be a psychologist. I was really, and I still am, about people and the power of listening. And particularly, I wanted to work with people of color. And I went and I got my bachelor's, and then I went to Nova Southeastern University to get my master's. So yeah, fins up.
Shark Nation.
Hey.
So while I was there, I signed up for the Federal Work Study program, where I happened to go to NSU Art Museum. My best friend is an artist, and I was like, wouldn't it be cool if I could connect with her on an art level as well? So she, as an artist, she was doing her own thing in Chicago, so, it was a whole different world over there, and so I was like, oh, let's connect that. When I got to the museum, my world changed, because I was like, wait, what is going on? Like, I didn't understand that there was a whole career. Like, for example, I didn't go to museums as a youth. I went to museums, science museums. I went to, lots of different activities, but it wasn't fine art museum, contemporary art museums. So my whole world and my mind just kind of just opened up, and I realized, wait a second, I could take up space here. And I went on a journey that was very, it might sound negative, but self-serving, because I was learning so much. I was growing in myself. And then while I was in my program and doing my practicum, I realized the systems are so flawed, they're so messed up. I just felt like, unfortunately, what I saw as the field, for me personally, was not what would be fulfilling. So I decided to stay in contemporary art. I decided to connect with organizations who I just love their missions and what they do. And I just soaked it all up. And basically from NSU Art Museum, I started a fellowship program at Girls Club Collection, which is a private collection, and we primarily exhibit women artists. And while I was there, I started to do a fellowship with Prism Art Fair, and it is the premier Black art fair here in South Florida. And from there, I hopped onto the cultural division. So like basically, I found spaces that I could take up space in, and learn about, and that's where I am right now. I'm still at Girls Club as the gallery manager now, some 6 years later, and then I also work at Fat Village Arts District, which is now under construction, but it was founded as an arts district in Fort Lauderdale. We had 2 exhibition spaces. One was a 8,000 square foot huge warehouse where we did, really crazy, huge installations, site-specific installations, and then one was a small black box gallery. So I've just found myself to just be 10 toes down in this career, because it's just, I think there's healing to be done in this work as well. So it's like, yes, psychology and mental health was where I wanted to go with healing, and now I've shifted that idea and that philosophy to arts and art spaces and what I could say through curation too.
So that's their background. How did you guys come up with this in this place?
So Kala, my dear friend and collaborator, approached me with the idea of working with Kandy. And Kandy had a title. She was like, boom, invisible.
Yeah, I have a list of titles on my phone.
Well, she's an avid reader, and so she, ideas come to her, maybe as a passage or a phrase or a concept. So she came with this title, Invisible Nepantla, and we, researched what Nepantla means, and basically I said, yeah, like this is, you do this. This is, I don't think it will be a stretch to look at your work and to find pieces that speak to this theme. So we met up a couple times, which is amazing. We're friends anyway, so that's, I think, another added layer to that is the fact that we've been friends for so long. We got to feature her years ago. And so it was just, for me, the hugest honor. I was just like, what? Yes, of course. And, especially here, I think that was important to know. I made a statement that just came out, like, this is a cultural heritage museum, and this is history. This is history, you know what I mean? Like, this is the future, and it's now, and it's gonna be forever. So I thought it was just really cool, for me. I don't know what you.
That was super sweet.
Sure.
Well, Paola came to one of my shows at the Bailey Arts Center. I think that's what they're called.
Bailey Arts.
Yeah. Baca. In Pompano Beach, and I had a solo show there because I won a grant from the Broward County. I applied for the innovation grant, so I can produce the stained glass pieces because I've had this idea of having minorities lit from the back, and also thinking about religion, and thinking about our history and imagery where we normally don't see ourselves. So like I've had this idea for a while, and I also really love transparencies. Like I like the metaphorical meaning of transparencies. I'm also a painter, like that's what I define myself as. So I like that even within paint, you can create transparencies, and transparencies has always been part of my work. So I had a solo at Baca, and Kaula came to an artist talk that I had. And inside of that solo show was just dedicated to the stained glass pieces. So I had a residency that year to the Dominican Republic, and I stayed in this town called Samaná, which is one of the most touristic towns that we have in Dominican Republic. My parents are Dominican. And I wanted to photograph people from this particular space because a lot of us, because I'm also a foreigner inside of that space, go here to vacation. We don't think about the people that work there, where they come from, where they live, how they live, and how their vacation, there's no vacation for them. They're like constantly working and getting paid nothing. So I wanted to honor them and also think about my heritage, and it's also a way for me to do research on myself too, because this is all like about identity pretty much, and like trying to figure out how I fit in with these multiple identities that I have. So Carlos on the show, she's like, this would be amazing at the space. And she's like, I would love for you to have a show there with some of the stained glass pieces. How would you feel if Tayina was the curator? I was like, let's do it.
Okay, so I think this is a good time this is like a great place to talk about a few of the ways that I think about Kandy's work. I have my start in photography and primarily portrait photography. And like you, I think of myself as grounded in one right photography, black and white photography, one lens, darkroom, that type of thing. So when you say you're a painter, and then we look around and we're like, we're in the painting.
Yeah.
I really identify with that, but there's something about being grounded in one medium, one tradition, and then kind of expanding out from that. But the main thing that I think as artists of color now, that, and I want to say this is like a late 20th century, early 21st century kind of thing, where there's a lot of media that comes to us that shows us people who are not necessarily us. So when we as artists start to work, we work with images of people who are closest to us. They're kind of almost fill in a space where you look at a painting, it's, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that I'm showing here, because I see Kandy's work kind of in this lineage of portrait artists of color throughout, or not of color, throughout the African diaspora, right? These are the different artists whose work that I see her work as in parallel to and in context with. But one of the things that we did, like at the end of the 20th century into this, is you're getting all this media of everybody, not us. And if you're seeing us, it's kind of like Bill Cosby, Claire Huxtable, not the people who are your classmates or your friends or the people down the street. It's not necessarily your neighborhood, and it doesn't mean that your neighborhood is a particular type of neighborhood. It just means it's not your neighborhood. And I think we're doing a much better job in masking it now, kind of representing diversity, the diversity of the Black experience throughout the world. But intimacy is one of the things that I notice in Kandy's work, and intimacy is what to me this Spady is all about. Like, this is a space with an architectural history, but there's a closeness to it. And I think when we look at her work, there is portraiture, but there's also landscape. And I want to talk a little bit about, well, okay, so where should I go? I have a ton of questions. Let's talk about the title of the show, because it's something, if it's what I think it is, it's that experience of going back to Grenada where you're not Grenadian, but when you're in the United States, you're not necessarily American, right? My dad's family's from Grenada, my mom's family is from Jamaica, I go there. I'm a stranger in those places, just like you were describing when you go back to New York, right? And that's like it's not liminality. And it's not really double consciousness, but there's kind of an overlap between and liminality and double consciousness. And I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about your title in terms of those things.
So I read a lot. Where did I get this reading from? I don't remember because my memory is, But I chose this title because it defined that in-betweenness that I felt. There was a period where I didn't go to DR. So like after I turned 15, I'm like, I'm not going back to that island. Like the island drives me crazy. The men in that island drive me crazy. The just like the political and social issues and classism and colorism that happens within the island, I was just like, I cannot deal. Because I felt other when I was there, even though I'm
Dominican when you're here.
right, or black, or just Mexican or Spanish or whatever,
Anything not American.
Right. But like even growing up, so I was born in Jersey, in Bayonne. It's a really small 2-mile radius town. In the 80s, it was basically white people, and then a little sprinkle of Spanish people and some black people inside of the space. Always like inside of this part of the city, never like integrated. And then we ended up moving down to Hialeah. For those that know South Florida, it's now just like Cuba Central. There's Argentinians there as well. There's Colombians that live there, and then a sprinkle of other people that are there too. But when I landed there, I still felt other too. So like I was other in Jersey, I'm other in DR, I was other in Hialeah. And finally, I ended up going to Rainbow Park Elementary School for a magnet program where like you're doing your regular school and then you do an arts, and I picked dance because dance was part of my culture, like we dance all the time. But ballet was introduced. I tell the story all the time. I'm not flexible, so I'm like, I'm not gonna do ballet in middle school. This is not gonna work. Like, I need to pick a different arts. And I can't act. You can see everything on my face. And I was like, music, I like to hear it, but I don't want to play it. Like, it's not something I'm interested in. And I used to draw like, you know, like his draw stick man and what you call it, Pokemon was a thing at the time. But it wasn't good. It wasn't like a good thing. It wasn't good at all. But my teachers taught the technical part of it, which is what I liked. Like I loved the challenge of that. And like being in a space where it was mostly African Americans and Hispanic people and like a small portion of white people that lived inside that area that were poor, right? So underfunded, everything is cut, like there's no money for arts or anything else. People like are sharing books that have, you know, inappropriate drawings in middle school. I felt like that's where I belong because it was more of a sense of class than anything else for me. So when I heard this term, I was like, oh, this is like the exact meaning of who I am and what my work is about, because all of it is like the in-betweenness. Like even in the city, there's a silhouette, but you can see the city cut into the space where like she's in there, but she's really not. Is she trapped? Is she giving it power? Like what is happening inside of that space? And these are scenes of like Miami that is like no longer there anymore. So it's like commemorating a city that once was, at least when I was growing up.
I think also when you look at the figures sort of standing in the street, that's a liminal space as well, right?
Yes.
Because they are in buildings that most of the people in these images didn't have anything to do with
No.
the construction of, you know, they have no power over what their city looks like, but they have power over how they express themselves within that space. And that comes across a lot in the quotes. So I want to talk about that because to me, I'm going to skip around. I have like a 4-part thing: project, process, place, and then like pressure and pleasure. But we're going to just hop around because I think when we look at the materials that you use, especially when you think of the fiber work that she has, there's a specificity to some of the pieces that she's done when she's worked in fiber, where if my students walked in, they were like, oh, those are those shoes from that store. Oh, that's that jacket. And some of that, when you moved to stained glass,
Yes.
you have a different type of specificity. It's now no longer the self-expression of the clothes necessarily.
Right.
It's something else. Sometimes.
So like the third one that's there is my cousin. So like the smaller one, his name's Louis, and he's also Dominican, and he lives in Queens, Jamaica. And he was born in DR, but his family brought him over, like my uncles, auntie brought him over. So he grew up in America. And he's a dope artist too, he just doesn't know it yet. So I've been like, you have something, because he takes really nice pictures. So that's actually an image that he took of himself. And I really like that image because it's still showcasing swag without incorporating like the clothes or like the chain. It's just like you have the cap, you know the cap. You don't know what logo is that cap, but it could be a New York logo, or it could be an LA logo, and then he has the hoodie that's on, which is like, now we're talking about political and social issues with this idea of like hoodie or covering yourself or feeling safe or hiding behind certain things so that you can get home.
Yeah. Wow.